The city of Eldenwood was alive that night, its streets shimmering under the glow of neon lights and the hum of restless energy. Clara Bennett stood at the edge of the dance floor, her heart pounding in a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. The music pulsed through her veins, the bass vibrating in her chest, and for a moment, she forgot who she was. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't a mother. She wasn't the woman who folded laundry while her husband, Ethan, scrolled through his phone, barely glancing her way. Tonight, she was someone else. Someone reckless. Someone free. And that freedom would come at a cost she could never undo. Clara Bennett had always been the kind of woman who followed the rules. At 34, she was a devoted wife to Ethan, a hardworking but distant man, and a loving mother to their 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Life in Eldenwood was predictable. Mornings filled with school runs, afternoons spent managing her small online boutique, and evenings where she and Ethan coexisted in a comfortable but passionless routine. They hadn't kissed like they meant it in years. They hadn't looked at each other like they meant it in even longer. Clara told herself she was content. But deep down, she felt invisible. The spark that had once ignited their marriage had faded into a dull, familiar ache. She missed being seen. She missed being desired. And that longing, buried beneath layers of responsibility, was about to surface in a way she never expected. It started with a text from her best friend, MIA Harper. MIA was everything Clara wasn't: single, carefree, and unapologetically bold. "You need a night out," MIA had said for months. "One night won't kill you." Clara always declined. Nights out were for women who didn't have husbands waiting at home or children who needed bedtime stories. But that Thursday evening, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Ethan had barely acknowledged her new dress at dinner. Maybe it was the way Mia's words echoed in her mind. "You deserve to feel good about yourself." Whatever it was, Clara finally said yes. The bar, Velvet Haze, was everything Clara had avoided for years. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey and perfume, the music loud enough to drown out her thoughts. At first, she felt out of place, like a stranger in her own skin. But then MIA handed her a drink, a margarita, sweet and tangy, and the first sip loosened something inside her. The second drink made her laugh a little too loudly. By the third, she was dancing, her body moving in ways she hadn't allowed herself in years. And then she saw him. Jake Carter was leaning against the bar, his dark eyes fixed on her. He wasn't smiling, but there was something in his gaze, a hunger, a curiosity, that made her pulse quicken. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a confidence that radiated across the room. Clara knew she should look away, but the alcohol had melted her inhibitions. Instead, she held his gaze, a silent challenge passing between them. When Jake finally approached, Clara's heart raced. "Can I buy you a drink?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. She should have said no. She should have walked away. But the night had already taken on a life of its own, and Clara was no longer the woman who always did the right thing. "Just one," she said, as if that would make a difference. The drink turned into a dance, the dance turned into a kiss, and the kiss turned into a night Clara would spend the rest of her life trying to forget. They ended up at a nearby hotel, the Eldenwood Inn, where the lines between right and wrong blurred into nothingness. For one night, Clara wasn't a wife or a mother. She was just a woman who wanted to feel alive. When Clara woke up the next morning, the weight of what she'd done crashed over her like a tidal wave. Jake was still asleep, his arm draped across the bed, and Clara felt a mix of shame and exhilaration. She dressed quickly, her hands trembling as she slipped out of the room and into the cool morning air. The city was waking up, but Clara felt like she was living in a nightmare. By the time she reached home, her mind was a whirlwind of guilt and regret. Ethan was still asleep, oblivious to her absence. Clara stood in the bathroom, staring at her reflection, wondering how she could ever look him in the eye again. She told herself it was the alcohol, the music, the way Jake had looked at her, anything to absolve herself of responsibility. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had wanted it. And that was something she could never admit. Clara spent the next few weeks in a haze, going through the motions of her life while carrying the weight of her secret. She avoided Mia's calls, terrified her friend would see the guilt written all over her face. She tried to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, but every time Ethan touched her, she flinched. Every time Lily hugged her, she felt unworthy. The worst part wasn't the guilt. It was the way she couldn't stop thinking about that night. The way Jake had made her feel, seen, desired, alive. It was a feeling she hadn't realized she was missing until it was gone. And now, it haunted her. One evening, as Clara sat on the couch folding laundry, Ethan turned to her and said, "You've been quiet lately. Is everything okay?" Clara froze, her heart pounding. For a moment, she considered telling him the truth. But then she looked at Lily, playing on the floor with her dolls, and she knew she couldn't. Some secrets were too heavy to share. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Ethan nodded, turning back to the TV, and Clara felt a pang of sadness. She had betrayed him, but she had also betrayed herself. She had crossed a line she could never uncross, and the weight of that decision would stay with her forever. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story about longing, about the choices we make when we feel invisible, and the consequences that follow. Clara's night at Velvet Haze wasn't just a mistake, it was a wake-up call. It forced her to confront the cracks in her marriage, the parts of herself she had buried, and the price of chasing a feeling she thought she'd lost forever. But most of all, it's a reminder that some secrets can't stay hidden. And sometimes, the hardest person to forgive is yourself.